How sex drives evolution. It cannot be supposed, for instance, that male birds of paradise, or peacocks, should take such pains in erecting, spreading, and vibrating their beautiful plumes before the females for no purpose. We wanted to start off with this quote because it does a great job at introducing the topic of this chapter. Everything in evolution happens for a reason. There's always a purpose for everything. The color of feathers on certain animals, the certain noises different animals make, are all for a purpose. And this chapter dives into what that purpose is. Peacocks seem to violate every aspect of Darwinism because the traits that make the peacock beautiful are at the same time maladaptive for survival. Now remember that maladaptive means that it's not providing adequate or appropriate adjustment to the environment or situation. The peacock's long tail causes many problems with flight, eventually leading to a struggle to become airborne and become hard to escape predators. Its sparkling colors also attract predators compared to the female's feathers, which are short-tailed and camouflaged a drab greenish-brown. Looking at all these things, one would think the peacock's plumage is an impediment, so how could this possibly be an adaptation? Also, if these were to make offspring and pass on their genes, how come females look so different? The peacock's tail was such an enigma that Charles Darwin said that it made him sick just looking at a feather. Another example similar to the peacocks are male bower birds. These birds build large bowers out of sticks that can be shaped like tunnels, mushrooms, or tents. The bowers are beautifully decorated and take hours and sometimes days to build, but aren't even used as nests. So why go through all this trouble for nothing? Well, as you'll see in the next slides, this trouble really isn't any trouble at all and is actually necessary. The male and female bowerbirds and the male and female peacocks are a few of the many examples of what are called sexual dimorphisms. Sexual dimorphisms are traits that differ between males and females of a species, coming from the Greek for two forms. Biologists have found that sexually dimorphic traits in males seem to violate evolutionary theory because of the fact that they waste time and energy and reduce survival. Selection is most likely responsible for these traits, or at least it should be, but how? We have to remember that the currency of selection isn't really survival, but successful reproduction. For example, having a fancy tale or a seductive song doesn't help you survive, but may increase your chances of having offspring, and that's how these traits came about. Darwin first recognized this trade-off and coined the name for the type of selection responsible for sexually dimorphic features as sexual selection. What is sexual selection? It's simply selection that increases an individual's chance of getting a mate. It operates in a unique way and produces seemingly non-adaptive adaptations. Sexually selected traits evolve if they do more than offset the male's diminished survival with an increase in his reproduction. For example, maybe widow birds with longer tails don't evade predators as well as ones with shorter tails, but females might prefer the longer-tailed males as mates. There are two forms of sexual selection. The first, direct competition between males for access to females. When males of a species battle it out directly, they win access to females by driving off competitors. Selection favors any trait that promotes such victories so long as, again, the chance of getting mates more than offsets any reduced survival. This type of sexual selection produces armaments, which could be stronger weapons, larger body size, or anything that helps a male win physical contests. The second type of sexual selection is female choosiness among possible mates. This selection produces the widow bird's long tail. Bright colors, ornaments, bowers, and mating displays are molded by this type of sexual selection. To females, not all males are the same. They find some males more attractive, so those genes that produce those certain favorable features by the female accumulate in populations. Here, there's also an element of competition between males, but it's indirect in a way where winning males have the loudest voices, brightest colors, or the sexiest displays. The winner is decided by the females. Ultimately, in both types of selection, males compete for the females. Northern elephant seals of North America's Pacific coasts show extreme sexual dimorphism for size and are polygynous, which means that males mate with more than one female during the breeding season. About a third of the males get to mate with certain groups of females whom they guard, and the other males then become single. Who gets to mate and who doesn't is determined by contests between the males before the females even get to the beach. This is male competition, and the prize is reproduction.
Why is it that both types of sexual selection consist of males competing for females? The answer comes down to female choosiness and to being specific to who they want to mate with and what they want. As we know, males produce greater amount of sperm as opposed to the eggs females produce in a lifetime. Although there are exceptions where females have to compete for males, an example is the seahorse. In this case, although the female is responsible for producing eggs, after the male fertilizes them, he's the one that carries them in a pouch in a belly until they hatch. Does sexual selection end with the act of sex? The answer is no. After a male has done the job of fertilizing the egg, the competition between the male-male, or as we've seen in some cases, female-female, does not end. The main factor as to why competition does not end is because females in many species mate with more than one male over a short period of time. This leads to a post-mating competition, a male competing for his paternity. This post-mating competition has caused sexual selection to produce some of the most intriguing features in some males. An example of such is a damselfly, which has a penis scoop. The way such feature works is if a male mates with a female who has already mated, he uses backward pointing spines on his penis to scoop out sperm of earlier mating mates after he inserts his own sperm, ensuring his paternity. Why sex? Why is it that an individual makes a sacrifice and only contributes 50% of its genes to the next generation, as opposed to asexual reproduction, where the individual contributes 100% of its genes to the next generation? Well, if we were to suppose that a normal gene in humans would lead to sexual reproduction, and the mutant form of that same gene led to asexual reproduction, being able to produce eggs that develop without being fertilized, we would be able to observe that males would become unnecessary and disappear. Females would reproduce parthenogenically, producing only daughters. The key to why sexual reproduction has not led to asexual reproduction is because there is random shuffling of genes that will produce new combinations of genes in the offsprings.
Keeping in mind what has been discussed before, sexual dimorphism in socially monogamous species adds support to sexual selection theory. They are not actually monogamous. For example, the fairy wren of Australia spend most of their adult life together, sharing parental care and territory. Yet they appear very different. That's because they have many other mates. Looking at sexual selection, this is what produces the color difference between the sexes. Again, species with more alluring characteristics usually compete with others that have a different characteristic. And species showing less sexual dimorphism show to be more monogamous. So looking at no sexual selection, that would indicate if there are pairs where there are no other mates, there's no need for sexual selection to attract the opposite sex. So species where females and males are similar are usually truly monogamous. Behavioral switch looks at certain species where the roles are switched as opposed to the female choosiness, like in seahorses. Why choose? Darwin's hypothesis: female's choice gave way to the male colors, ornaments, and calls for aesthetic purposes. Although true, there are also studies that show that preferring certain types of males aids in spreading the female gene, benefiting the female directly, that is by choosing a male that will help produce more healthier offspring, as in parental care, and indirectly by choosing a male with better genes that will be beneficial in the next generation. The good gene model tries to answer the question if there's a preference between direct or indirect benefit. For example, looking at the gray tree frog, studies show that females prefer males with longer calls. To test if such males have better genes, there were different female eggs that were fertilized, half with long call males and the other half with short call males. Results showed that the longer call male offspring grew faster and larger, given that the gray frogs have no other contribution than sperm. Females do not get a direct benefit, leaning towards an indirect benefit. The sensory bias models are just functions other than finding a mate, such as food or stimulating features like bigger males, complex displays, or oddly shaped males because of their longer tails. This model doesn't really look at the female preference genes from a direct or indirect point of view, but more as to how there can be more variation through sexual selection and aid males in creating more genes or new genes.